Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dmitriy Balkovskiy of the Reactionary Vlog, and here is my interview with James Anderson of SDBullion and silverdoctors.com. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my dear viewers, our dear viewers, and let me introduce to you James Anderson of SDBullion and silverdoctors.com. James will talk about realities of a bullion dealer in the United States. This is very, very interesting for Russian viewers. There are lots of myths and misconceptions about the situation in the bullion industry around the world. Please, James, tell us about yourself a little bit, about your website and your dealership.
Sure thing. Dmitry, thanks for having me on your YouTube channel and giving me the opportunity to speak to your viewers. Myself, I'm a United States citizen. I'm 38, 39 years old, almost 40. I've been in this industry just over 10 years. I've been working since just before the financial crisis started in 2008. I've been investing in precious metals since about 2006, and I have a degree in finance, undergrad degree in finance. So I have some training in the background of economics and finance of the United States especially. So I've been working in this industry for some time. SDBullion, I've been with this company now for about 2 years, and we're probably a top 5 retail high volume bullion dealer online. So if someone simply searches something like buy silver bars, you'll find our website on the first page of Google results. At least here in the United States, that's the case. In terms of retail bullion demand, the United States is one of the major countries in the world, especially in the silver bullion industry. There is a lot of people buying silver bullion in the United States for a whole multitude of reasons I'm sure we'll likely get into later on. But as well, there's a lot of individuals buying gold bullion too. That's a little bit of a background of who I am and why I got involved in precious metals. I suppose it started even at a young age when I was real little. My grandfather's farmhouse, when I was very tiny, I'd walk around his house and search through the closets, and I found a bucket of old silver coins. See, we used to have silver in our circulating coinage up till 1964. And when they took silver out of the coins, a lot of the older generations decided that they would keep the silver coins and keep spending the bad coins. It's what we call in monetary theory, it's called Gresham's Law, where you spend the bad money and you save the good money. Yeah, I found that very interesting, was that why are these silver coins being held in, why are people holding on to them? Why are they not spending them? It was interesting and intriguing to me. It was almost like pirate money. It was so shiny and pretty and nice. And that kind of intrigued me as a young boy. Then I started studying about the economy in college and was lucky enough to have a couple professors that were from the Austrian School of Economics, not just the Keynesian side of economics. And so I got a perspective from them that was a little bit more critical of the system that we currently use for our monetary affairs in the United States. That kind of gave me a perspective to question a little bit more than perhaps some people may regarding some of the foundational beliefs that we use in this country. After graduating from college, I traveled and lived in Latin America for a few years, and that really helped me to get a perspective beyond the United States, because personally I think that we have one of the most highly propagandized cultures in the world. And so people who live here and only stay here don't really have a very clear concept of the rest of the world. We're only 1 out of 20 human beings on the earth, and the other 19 out of 20 human beings have other perspectives that are worth understanding and that are worth trying to grasp and get a hold of. And so the best way to do that is to go try and live for some time. And I was lucky enough to get to do that when I was about 23, 24, 25. I got to live in Central America and even in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And anyone who's ever traveled to Argentina knows it's not necessarily a pro-Yankee section of the world. They have more of a critical eye toward the North Americans that come down there and exploit their banking system and use it as a way to enrich some of the highest elite people in that country at the expense of the masses. And so getting a different perspective of some of the things that we have done financially to some countries and some of the things that we did geopolitically, definitely during the Cold War, hearing some of those stories, it shook a lot of my previous misconceptions as to the true history of the world, especially on this side of the hemisphere. And so that was very eye-opening. And then coming back from those travels, I lived in Southern California for a while. I was really heavily involved in investing and researching about gold and silver. I really thought it was an interesting topic and kind of went down that rabbit hole when I started getting involved with the Ron Paul campaign in 2007.
Okay. You were with Ron Paul in 2007. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So you know him personally and all?
I've actually not met him personally, never talked to him, but definitely involved with that campaign right in the beginning in 2007 when the original Tea Party events were happening. There was a Tea Party event that I was at in Santa Monica that was a really interesting affair. There was thousands of people there. They were kind of doing a reenactment of the Tea Party where they were throwing in different boxes into the water, like things that they were against, like IRS, things like military-industrial complex, these ridiculous wars that we kept getting into.
IRS went first, probably, right?
IRS was definitely one that people question and still question to this day whether or not that's a constitutional affair. Either way, that was really what helped to kind of spur me along a little further. And then eventually I was so involved in it, I figured I'd go ahead and start looking for some type of job opportunity or career potential in the industry. It so happens that Los Angeles has a long legacy of coin collecting and precious metal dealers. And I was lucky enough to run into one where the opportunity worked out. I started my career in Southern California and worked there for about 5 or 6 years. And basically from there, I've moved on and worked with some of the largest dealers in my career here, doing marketing and sales work for various companies. So my experience is pretty broad in the precious metals industry in the United States.
All right. Yeah, very interesting. So you've been involved with it for a very long time, 2006. Over the years, has the industry changed? What changes do you notice in tastes, in preferences, and sales strategies? What's new compared to 2006 or 2011?
So what's changed the most probably in that time frame has been just the internet in general. The speed and the complexity of the internet. I guess in 2006, 7, 8, the companies that were the biggest then are not necessarily the biggest now. A lot of those companies that were big back then were first to market. They have since lost a lot of market share because they just weren't that good when it came terms to using the internet to leverage and find new customers. They didn't necessarily adapt quick enough to the changing of the internet. I mean, in my industry, that's kind of why some players are winning and some players are losing. In terms of the actual investors, before 2008, bullion was a very small industry. It didn't have as much, I just don't think it had as much respect or even understanding from the broad investing community. I think a lot of people looked at bullion and thought, well, yeah, gold had its day in 1980 and that's that. They really didn't understand much about the fundamental picture or the larger scope of why people invest in gold, why governments and central banks hold gold. I think 1 out of 5 ounces of physical gold is held by governments at the moment. I don't think people really understood the broad spectrum or the mechanics of the financial industry before the 2008 financial crisis. Once that occurred, a certain segment of the population was so shaken by it that all their fundamental beliefs were called into question, and they had to go and start from scratch again and relearn how the system works. And to be quite honest, when you learn how it works, I think it shakes a lot of your belief and your confidence in it. And I think that's what's happened, is that certain people will never have that confidence again. It's kind of like the red versus the blue pill, and they took the red pill, and that's that. They'll always have a concern. When you start to learn about how our monetary system actually operates and what it's built upon, you start to have a little bit of a concern and maybe have, you basically want to have some portfolio percentage in your allocation into precious metals, because you never know what could happen with the economy, especially after 2008. People, I think, are concerned and they feel like the economy is still fragile, and what we've been told is not necessarily true. It's not as if the economy has been booming ever since. It's been basically tapered over with band-aids and more debt supposedly, and probably some machinations for accounting that have masked a lot of the underlying issues that have not been dealt with. And a lot of people believe that we still have a lot of issues to deal with. And when that comes, it'll be helpful to have an allocation in bullion while other asset classes may drop. Gold and silver potentially could gain in value and offset some of the losses elsewhere.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so things have changed.
They
Things
have
have
it.
changed.
They have changed in terms of psychology. I think a lot of people out there, especially the younger generations, they don't buy a lot of the stuff that people say on CNBC. They don't listen to those people as if they're gods any longer. I think a lot of them look at them and with the eye of, what kind of fraud are you trying to pull on me now? I think a lot of people look at banks and think a good percentage of those people are fraudulent. There's a big critical eye when you look at some of these people and you think, well, how are they scamming me? You get now with the internet the ability to learn about anything also. You can do due diligence on a lot of people very quickly, and that's helpful too. The internet is hard for the internet to forget. People are doing things that are not honest, and so you can find out quickly what type of person you're dealing with. That's been helpful too. And as far as just in general, since 2008 to now, there is a large spectrum of probably 1 million to 2 million people out there who consistently are buying precious metals, and they haven't really stopped. They just kind of treat it like a checking account that they actually can hold.
What about buyers' profile? Has it changed? Is there an inflow of new buyers, like noticeable inflow? And say in Russia, it's 90% men over 40.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I would say 90% of males. There is especially in 2008 financial crisis, in the business that I was working in at the time, we had a lot of real estate investors who were coming out of real estate and using that capital to go into gold and silver. And there was a wide variance of females too that were doing it. It wasn't just males. And even to this day, there's some females as well, head of households, or even wives who have more power in the household than the husband when it comes to calling what happens with the money. It's not all males, but it is vast majority is male. And then as far as what they're buying, it depends on the age a lot of times. I find when someone is toward the end of their life, when they're 55, 60, they want to have probably more allocation to gold because it's less volatile. You know, they have less time in their life to wait for things to appreciate. Silver can take a decade or two sometimes before it spikes and really gets running and has a lot of appreciation and tightens its ratio to gold. So silver seems to be something that a lot more of the younger demographic of people are buying. I would say people who are 40 and below, it's very common for them to just buy silver only. People who are 40 and older will typically buy some gold, some platinum as well. And then as we get in the 60, 70 range, there's people who just simply buy gold, and they buy it and look at it as if I may sell it at some point. If it goes higher, I may sell a little bit, or maybe I'll just give it off to my heirs and just, privately give it to them as I pass on.
Because in Russia, there is a small but very active silverback community. It's tiny, but it's really, probably noticed. The silver people they're activists. So.
Yeah. It runs the gamut. You can get them both. You can get people who believe worship at the altar of gold and silver and think it's the answer to everything, and then you have that. And you have some people who think doomsday stuff, like the world's going to fall apart and this is what they're going to use to spend and buy groceries with. And then you have people...
They buy smaller coins, like quarters or tenths of an ounce, yes.
Correct, yeah. So they'll buy smaller allotments thinking that eventually someday it'll come in handy if the dollar really goes to hell. And, I don't necessarily believe that. I think when you look at the spectrum of potential outcomes of what's going on, it's kind of a bell curve, and that's on the far left of the bell curve of potential outcomes. I think it's more in the center where you have, maybe some issue politically where all of a sudden all the governments get together and decide on a new system. And in that new system, perhaps there's some basis in gold. In the new system, I think that the next system will have to have revaluation of real things versus financial assets. Financial assets I don't think, ever been as overvalued versus real things as they currently are. Commodities are just so cheap compared to these financial assets, which seem to be at the highest levels of price and value versus commodities that I've ever seen. If you go back in history, it's very difficult to find a time when financial assets were this overvalued versus just regular normal things in real life. My hunch is that will sway back in the coming decade or so.
Yes. Yeah, I agree completely. That's true. Tesla is too expensive.
Yeah,
I'm no expert on stocks, but please. Come on.
We're at a situation too where the debt levels are so high and the governments have promised so much. In order to be able to deliver on the promises that they've made, especially Western governments and pension funds, et cetera, in order to deliver on that, they're going to have to devalue the dollar. Essentially, that's nominally you'll get your Social Security check and all that, but there's no promise as to exactly what it's going to buy. And there's already kind of a trend here where they're talking about a new ideology of how the Federal Reserve or how the government should finance itself. And there's this thing called MMT, modern monetary theory, that they're talking about.
Yes.
And that's,
we hear of that too.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and that is coming. I mean, they're not getting all this attention for no reason. I think it's conditioning the public to get ready for a new proposal as to the way that the government should finance itself. And it sounds to me as if this is likely going to be something that in the next few years comes to pass, where there's going to be more experiments of financing that we've never seen before. And the question will be, can they control the confidence level of human beings? Because at the moment, the currency is really based on confidence, and the value of it is based on confidence. If that confidence gets shaken, which I think is, as long as it's shaken slowly but surely, is in the best interest of all these governments who promise more than they can deliver. I think they do want to devalue their currencies, but they want to do it in a controlled path and not some crazy overnight manner.
Right. They really want to. I don't think they will be successful in this endeavor, but they do want to have everything under control and devalue like they used to. But well, let's wait and see how it works out. So now, could I ask you about the popularity of different gold and silver coins?
Yeah, what's the most popular coin that people buy in the United States, and what are the products that people mostly purchase at SDBullion? I did a blog on this recently. I think it's called Top 10 Bullion Products at SDBullion, and I went and looked at the data for the last few years as far as overall sales volumes, which products sold what amount. The top products, and it's been this way ever since I've gotten in the industry, in terms of the number one product, is still the gold American Eagle and the silver American Eagle. Those are both coins that are produced by the U.S. Mint. I would say the silver American Eagle is neck and neck with the gold American Eagle. In some years, it even, I think, outsold the gold Eagle in terms of overall dollar sales. When you're talking about ounce to ounce, the amount of silver Eagles that are sold is far outsizes the amount of gold Eagles that are sold year on year. I think at one point there was maybe 10 to 1 ounces of silver that were being sold of Eagles versus gold. So year on year, that's the number one product. I'd say the next biggest product in North America would be the Canadian Maple Leafs, the gold and silver Maple Leaf coins. They're very popular in the sense that United States people trust them. It's our next door neighbor coin. The value of them is pretty high. They're well regarded. And the Canadian Mint has done a really good job of getting ahead of counterfeit issues and putting new types of patterns on the coins that help to alleviate the issue of fakes coming out of China. They've been very, very ahead of the curve on that side and spectrum. Canadian coins are probably second. And then if you're talking about third, it really changes from year to year. Certain years, it seems like the Austrian Mint, when I first got into the industry in 2008, Austrian Mint was really popular because at some points there was issues with the U.S. Mint. They couldn't even keep up with the demand during the financial crisis. So there was a month or two occasionally where the Austrian Philharmonic was the only silver coin that you could get freshly struck. And they sold millions upon millions of those coins at the time because the demand was so high and they were able to meet it. So I think in that time they were definitely third. They've fallen off a little bit of late in the last few years. I'm not sure what's gone on there at their mint. Maybe demand isn't that high, but there's been others that have come in. The Australian Mint has done a good job with their kangaroo coin the last couple of years. I think in 2015, 2016, this case was the same where the U.S. Mint had to shut down for a month or two. And at the same time, the kangaroo was just coming out with their high volume silver bullion coin, the Australian one. And they sold millions of those in a matter of a month or two, just because the U.S. Mint wasn't able to produce their silver eagle. And so a lot of people were buying the kangaroo instead. It runs from different mint to mint, but typically number one is the U.S. Mint's silver eagles. Number two is the Canadian Mint's maple leaf coins. Then you talk about various other mints. A little bit further down, you talk about just general private silver rounds. In the United States, you have silver rounds. They look like coins, but technically in the industry, we don't call them coins because they don't have a legal tender face value. They're not produced.
Right, like Scottsdale rounds.
Well, no, Scottsdale actually does produce some coins, but they do produce rounds as well. But Scottsdale gets the capability to strike some government coins because the government gives them that authority to do so in their name, and they sign off on it. So they do strike some that have legal tender face values. And say there's a few countries I'm trying to remember. They do a couple of African countries and a couple. Yes, I think Cayman Islands they do one for. So, but like a private mint that only really, that's really popular here would be sunshine minting. That's one of them. Another one is called Silvertown Mint. They produce these things that look like coins, and they're just a lot cheaper. So a sunshine minting or a Silvertown round, you can get it right now for about 65, 75 cents per ounce over spot. So it's a lot cheaper than, say, a Silver Eagle, which is usually like $2.25, $2.50 over spot. A $2 difference to some people means a lot, and they don't really understand or care whether or not it's a government coin, and they just want as many ounces as they can buy so they get the rounds. And then there's people who like bars, and they make bars in all sizes from tiny 1 gram gold bars all the way up to 100-ounce silver bars, 1 kilo gold bars. There's all types of different bars that are made by different mints depending on the size. Like if you're a millionaire investor and you wanted to come in, you may get gold in just large bars. You may just get them in kilo bars and store them in a Brinks vault or a Loomis vault and just have your account with kilo bars there, and that's your gold position. And that's right. a very safe way for people to hold gold or silver. They'll do 100-ounce bars in silver so they can get a low premium price and get as many ounces as they can for their US dollars. It runs the gambit, really, but the number one by far, it's still by far, is the American Eagle gold and silver coin.
In Russia, the situation is quite different, as it turns out. In the past 5 years, there was a noticeable switch from 917 purity coins to Philharmonicers, and Philharmonicers especially because they're very nice for stacking, 1 ounce Philharmonicers, gold ones. But the Silver Eagle is still the most popular here. That's true. And what's your opinion of Queen's Beasts, this new British series? Excellent quality.
Yeah, Royal Mint has done a really good job of, that's been a big change that I didn't talk about with you recently. When I first got in this industry, there weren't this many options as far as designs and types of coins and bars being minted. When I first got in this industry, there was probably 30 variants of products that you could depend on that were always there. Now there's 300 variants, maybe not as deep as the top 10 products, but there's a whole sway of different designs and people creating coins or bars or rounds. There's some people here in the United States doing it in their backyard, literally. Like there's hobbyists who are now pouring their own silver, pouring their own gold pieces. There's a real weird niche that's grown up in the last 4 to 5 years. I saw a video today where someone literally bought SDBullion Freedom rounds that we produce, one of the cheapest silver rounds that we sell. He had a video where he showed, I just got these silver rounds, and then he shows clips over to what he did with them. He put them in a furnace, he melted them down, and then he turned them into these little 5-ounce brick billets that were really shiny and pretty, and he puts his own stamp on them, and he sells them at his own shop for probably $1 or $2 over spot because they're just so, they're artistic. They're not made for high volume, they're made for collectors, people who like to have a unique piece of this and that and of this and that. And so, it runs the gamut from people wanting to have, say, 6 figures, $1 million of the same products so they can easily sell them when they want to, versus some people who are just collectors who want to have 1,000 different pieces of all types of things because they enjoy the beauty of it. When they want to sell, or if they ever want to sell, they'll just sell one piece at a time here or there. So it really is a gambit between people who are simply using it as just a hedge and they don't really care about form, versus people who really love the artistry of it and enjoy it as more of a collectible almost than even an investment.
I've never heard of like coins made or rounds made in the backyard. That's quite original. No, nothing like that in Russia. At least I'm not aware of it. And the question about counterfeits in gold, is it a real danger in your view? And I mean in investment gold, not in numismatics. And cash or card, what's the tendency? Do people buy with cash still or mostly card?
So on the counterfeit side, there's a few different threats, depending. If you're buying really large gold bars, a couple of years back in the jewelry district in New York, there was a couple large gold bars. I think they were 10-ounce gold bars that had tungsten inserted inside of them. And these were professionally done. You could tell whoever did them knew what they were doing, and they did a really good job of creating counterfeits. They were probably made out of China. That is a concern in the industry. Not very often that this is found. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. I've not seen something like like that since. But it's enough that every dealer now, when they buy any type of large amount of precious metals from a non-mint, from a place where it's not brand new, if it's secondary product, they have to do their work to make sure that it's legitimate. So there's different options for being able to figure that out. We have a few different methodologies we use to ensure everything we buy from our customers is exactly what we think it is. And we want to ensure that we never buy a counterfeit product and then sell it accidentally, because the most important thing for us is our brand name. That would be the last thing we'd ever do, is want to ruin that. Trust in this industry is paramount. It's the most important part of your success or your potential to be successful. You have to be trustworthy. Without that, everything else falls apart. As far as like counterfeits on a person-to-person level, there are a lot of different counterfeits that are made typically in China. Basically a sport over there. There's different whole small towns that run on counterfeit tourism where you go to the town and you can buy counterfeits of everything from counterfeit DVDs to counterfeit gold and silver products, counterfeit this, counterfeit that. Basically a culture sport in China. Problem is that the internet and companies like Alibaba, they claim on their website that they don't sell counterfeits, but yet if you look hard enough, you'll find them. A lot of people in the United States who don't have the best intentions sometimes we'll get them from China and then go around and sell them on smaller websites like a Craigslist or on little forums here or there. And they'll find people, usually what they'll use is greed. They'll usually use the tactic of, oh, hey, I got some gold here and I got to sell it right away. They'll have some story that they'll tell the investor, and the investor, they'll say, I'll sell it to you at spot, or I'll sell it to you even below spot if you got cash, and give the investor the idea that, oh, I'm going to get a great deal because this dum-dum doesn't know what they own. And so a lot of times they'll do that, and maybe a day or two later, the guy will figure it out, or even years later, they'll go to a coin shop to sell it, and they'll find out, oh, you got taken with a fake coin or a fake bar or this or that. So on a person-to-person level, the counterfeit threat is very real. It's less risky for someone who's pulling that to do it on a person-to-person basis. If someone tried to pull that on us as a company, we would contact the local police and authorities, and they would get tracked down, or they would have people going after them. But if they do it on a person-to-person basis, I think they feel like they have better opportunity to get away with it. And if someone calls their bluff, they can run and not have it come back on them. But with us, we're going to need information from you if we ever engage. We're going to need addresses, phone numbers, names, emails, etc., IP address. We're going to have all that information. And if you end up pulling something like that, we're going to come after you. So it's much more risky to try and pull that on a professional versus someone online who's just trying to do a trade person to person. And then you
don't buy on eBay, basically.
You can on eBay. There's some dealers. We do a lot of sales on eBay. You just have to make sure that the dealer you're working with is a professional and has been in this industry long enough so that they know how to make sure they're not selling you something that's fake, and they have a long track record of being honest and being good servicemen. There are new sellers on eBay. I would be very wary of that. But if someone has a really good, honest track record, then you probably can trust in it. The nice thing about eBay is that they're a middleman, and if there is counterfeit or issues, typically they'll side with the buyer, and the seller will be the one that gets in trouble. Just be careful. You always got to know who you're working with. That's the main key, is that you buy from people who are trustworthy. You also asked about cash or card, or what's the tendency in the United States for payment. It depends. There's kind of two tiers or two different sides to this industry. We're on the high volume online bullion side, so people can just log into their computer, put their order in, lock in their price, and it'll be in, then they make their payments depending on how they want. Online bullion dealers like ourselves, we don't really take cash. We can take cash equivalents, which is basically like bank check or something like that, or anything like that, as long as it's not up to $10,000. Anything below $10,000, there's a couple exceptions, but usually we'll allow people to do that. But once you hit that 10,000 mark, it starts to become anti-money laundering issues. We don't want to be ever in trouble where it looks like we're trying to help people launder money. So we have various thresholds for payments that you can and can't use cash equivalents. So typically most people, they pay online dealers with check. Nowadays, last couple of years, there's been a big push toward ACH, which has become even more convenient. ACH is just an electronic check, where you log in and you place the order and you say, I'll pay with ACH. And then you put in some checking information for your bank account, and then it automatically withdraws it straight away. It's much faster. You don't have to wait for the mail. You don't have to wait the long holding period that some of the checks require. So it's made the process A, convenient, B, faster even, and even more secure than some of the checks were. The other way that people pay when when they start to get into larger orders, they'll just pay with bank wire transfer. That's typical of orders that are six figures or higher. People will just wire the money. And a lot of times you can just wire it straight from your bank, and sometimes you have to go physically to the bank. It really depends on the size of your bank and how good their website is. And then as well, there's a lot of brick and mortar coin shops in the United States, places where you can just drive up with your car, and if you wanted to say turn $1,200, $1,500 of cash, US dollars, into silver, you can just walk right in and buy it right there and put it on, cash on the barrel. You just drop it on the counter and you buy the bullion right there and you walk out. A lot of people like that because in their minds it feels more private. There's no name, there's no information that say a federal agent could go find. They would have to drive and track you down at your house. It's just more private. People don't like the idea of having any information that could ever be traced back to them. They want to keep it so private. There's privacy issues depending, if you go to a coin shop like that, that's fine. Just make sure you do about four different routes on the way home so you can make sure you're not getting tracked. Yeah, if you're paranoid, you can make a case for everything. You have to be diligent, I suppose, about where you hold what and in what volume. It is risky. There have been people who have been robbed at gunpoint at their house if they're not careful about who knows what they have where. So you have to be intelligent about the way you do this. You can't be careless because it is risky in the sense that if your gold or silver gets taken, it's virtually impossible to track. You are putting yourself at risk if you're not careful with what you're doing. In terms of cash, and Dmitry, to answer the question, you can't move massive amounts of cash into bullion because that starts to cross anti-money laundering lines. So if someone walked into a coin shop and said, I have $20,000 in cash to buy gold with, the coin shop dealer, if he wants to stay in business, is going to tell that guy, hit the road. I don't want your drug money. That's basically what he's going to have to tell the guy, because it turns out to be a federal agent. That coin shop dealer is going into either get fined out of business or go to prison. You have to be very careful when you're dealing in high volumes of cash within the United States, or pretty much in any Western democracy in general.
And in some authoritarian countries back east too. So
okay, makes sense. The powers that be want to know who has what. That's just the way it works.
Yes, they do. That they do, for sure, everywhere. To finish off our conversation, very, very interesting, and for our Russian viewers, especially Russian listeners, is going to be very informative. What's your advice to Russians, to Americans?
Yeah, my advice to viewers, I think, is to understand that not all things stay the same. So when you look back 30, 40 years, the US dollar has been the reserve currency of the world, and it's been the main currency that you could go to when there was crises. And a lot of times during crises, the US dollar actually appreciates in value versus other currencies. And that may not always be the case. As you Russian listeners probably know, Russia has been buying a lot of gold officially in the last decade or so. The same has been happening with China, although officially it's only been going up a little. I think unofficially it's probably along the lines of the speed at which Russia has been doing so. It just hasn't been official yet. My hunch is Russia and China and a few other Eastern countries will eventually have their own system of monetary affairs. So we may end up with a system where in the world where you have a Western block of currencies and an Eastern block of currencies with variations as to what the values are versus one another. And my hunch is during that time frame, gold will value much higher than it currently is now. And so my suggestion would be to be prudent about the way you allocate your investments. I wouldn't put all my eggs in a dollar basket, or all my eggs in a euro basket, or all my eggs in a gold basket. I would have a portion in each. You want to have prudent allocations, not everything in one place. And in gold and in silver, we published studies on our website from 1968 to the end of 2016. When you look at gold, it always made sense throughout that 40-odd year history, maybe 50-year history, that you would have about 20% allocation to gold versus U.S. equities, U.S. stocks, or U.S. bonds. So having an allocation to gold made a lot of sense. And I think it will make sense too in the decade to come, because we're still in a fiat monetary system. And until that changes, gold should appreciate in value over the long haul and be a good place to store wealth.
Excellent advice. Thank you, James. We really wish you well in your personal life and your business and your effort to educate the populace. It's very important, very worthwhile. Thank you very much for watching.